How you guys doing?
What's up?
I'm Caesar.
And I'm Jackie.
And yeah, I'll go real quick.
Okay.
And if you haven't met us, right, we are counselors at the Antiochian Village in 2020. Virtual camp 2020.
First ever.
Counselors. We're gonna teach you a lot about MoPro.
We hope
about,
so.
Like the church, everything. So, Jackie, how are you doing?
I'm good, Caesar. How are you?
I'm fine. I've been it's been weird.
Yeah.
It's been weird. Obviously not having camp is a real adjustment.
I'm gonna have to agree with you on that.
Exactly.
But it's tough, but virtual camp this is gonna go down in history.
Exactly.
We're doing something like iconic.
We're doing something that has never been done before.
Never.
We're doing something on a global scale to where kids in China could be watching our videos, kids in like a different continent.
Shout out to my Session 3 friend Diego in Spain and everyone around the world who's watching this MoPro video.
Yeah, exactly. So we can make camp viral. All that TikTok stuff, those kids.
TikTok. AV takes TikTok. What do you think?
I don't know about that. I was just kind of saying viral stuff goes viral on TikTok.
All right,
but we could also go viral on the internet. Yeah. Anyways, so the point of us being here and making these videos for you guys is obviously to teach you guys about the liturgy. Actually our.
You forgot.
My bad.
Mention that. So Caesar and I are your Christian ed teachers for the topic of the Divine Liturgy. And oftentimes, a lot of people kind of go through the motions and don't really understand what the Divine Liturgy is or what it means. Mm-hmm. So, do you know what it means? I hope we know what it means. We're gonna teach them what it means. Now, you have to remember, we're not priests and we're not experts, and Google is everyone's best friend, and the Bible.
No, if you guys have questions, trust me, it's like ask a booner. If you really have questions about stuff, Google it. It works. Well, that's what we did. We learned a lot about this from doing research about it, and you guys could literally learn just about it as much as we know about it, other than being taught in Sunday school or whatever, random stuff. You could learn a lot about it just by looking it up too.
Absolutely.
So understand, like Jackie was saying, we're not professors of morning program.
Theology.
We weren't sat in a classroom and learned all this stuff, and we don't have degrees, but we're gonna try to teach you guys something that's gonna be fun. We're gonna have fun with it. We're gonna try to make it as interesting as possible. If it's boring, turn off this video right now. If it's already boring you, turn off.
But wait.
Fake fans, what?
I don't know. We got no fake fans, but we do have a lot to offer, and I think you should stay tuned because we have some pretty cool information about the Divine Liturgy that you may or may not have known.
Yeah, and this is basically our YouTube channel. So,
So
we're gonna have another lesson after this one. This is our first lesson. Tune in for our subscribe, like, and comment
down below
right away.
Zoom comments. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
The Zoom chat, talking us up to everybody.
Yeah.
Send this video to every movie producer I'm trying to get low-key trying to get famous. This is the only reason I'm doing it. Volunteer work now. Anyways, but
here we are, and we're gonna tell you about the Divine Liturgy right now.
Word.
So
you wanna start off?
Yeah, I can give a brief overview. So basically, the Divine Liturgy is a meeting place for heaven and earth. So as Orthodox Christians, something that you may or may not have heard from your priest or any Sunday school lesson, Christian ed lesson, or if you've been to camp, you might know that the Divine Liturgy is a place where we believe we are entering heaven. So something that I kind of Caesar and I were talking about this a little while ago, that is kind of a cool fact, is that not a lot of churches are kind of built like the Orthodox Church. So an Orthodox Church is kind of built like a dome, whereas a lot of other Lutheran and Protestant and other churches are built like this. And so the reason for that is that we don't believe that we're kind of pointing to heaven. We believe that we're in heaven and that we are the essence of God's kingdom. And so this is kind of a really cool fact because that is why we attend Divine Liturgy. So that's what kind of happens there, and it's a meeting place for Christians to come together between heaven and earth. So
exactly, we try to make, like, in the church, we try to make the church as close to heaven as we can. Like, try to make it as holy as a place, and like really feel like we're in heaven, to where when we have that rounded church, we're not looking up to anything. We're not trying to go anywhere in that moment while we're in church. We're trying to stay in heaven with like each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's kind of like that mystical bond when we receive the body and blood of Christ between us and God.
Exactly, and that's the whole, like, this is a great introduction to this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Because the Divine Liturgy is a special service because it can only be celebrated with a priest or someone present like that. With other services, you can go through this, like, some services you can do at home, but with the Divine Liturgy and with the communion at the end and all these things, like all these sacraments that are given to us, holy bread, everything, there needs to be a priest present to, like, bring that bond with us and God, ensure it.
That's actually kind of cool. And did you know that a priest can't really celebrate Divine Liturgy by himself either? You
can't?
No.
Well,
So basically what I'm saying is Divine Liturgy must be, it's a public celebration, obviously for Orthodox Christians, and that is something that cannot be celebrated by one person. It can't just be celebrated by the clergy alone or the people alone or a single person. It must be celebrated with at least 2 or more people. And it's kind of interesting because I just said by Orthodox Christians, but there's kind of this thing that, like, I never really understood, and it's the way that the Divine Liturgy is broken down. So we talk about being an Orthodox Christian and celebrating this service, but there's actually 2 parts regarding that to the Divine Liturgy service. And the first part is called the Liturgy of the
what's that word?
What is it? The catechumens?
Cats?
Catechumen.
I know what a cat is.
I don't know what
a cat is.
You don't know what a catechumen is, though.
Oh, a catechumen.
I knew you
okay,
would.
A
catechumen. Yeah, of
it's
course.
It's a weird word. It means somebody coming into the faith, basically.
Right. So they're not necessarily Orthodox Christian yet, but they want to be?
They're trying to be baptized.
So
Yeah, so a lot of us, we come into the church and we are baptized when we're like babies, and we don't really know the significance of it. But when somebody's coming into the church, they need to be baptized into the church to be Orthodox. And so when somebody is in the process of becoming baptized, then they're called a catechumen. And the root of that word, like, it's a weird word. It comes from the meaning of, like, question and answer. That's really all it means. And by that, it means when somebody's coming into the church, they're supposed to be asking questions. They're supposed to be, like, they're highly encouraged to, whenever they, like, see something they don't understand, to ask a question about it. And have somebody who is Orthodox, is educated on the topic, to come and answer their questions. And if you keep doing this over and over, you're going to have all your questions answered, and then that means that you're, like, you understand the faith and you're Orthodox.
So I guess my question is, like, at St. Nicholas in Connecticut, our church, do we do the 2 parts of the liturgy? Do we do the service of the catechumens or the liturgy of the catechumens, and then the second part, aka the liturgy of the word? Do we do both of those? Is that like a common thing?
Yeah, we do it every time.
Really? So I mean, that's something, you learn something new every day.
Exactly. So the first part of the service is broken up to where it's like right after the gospel is read. That's like the cutoff for the liturgy of the catechumen, and that is made, like, that whole process of the first part being just for the catechumen, the people coming in. It's not just for them, but it's like, it's called the liturgy of the catechumen because it is like a educational thing.
Absolutely.
You're in there and you have the readings and you learn little things about, like, scripture. They read the Psalms and everything. Like, you learn a lot about the church.
For sure. But hold on. That's kind of like, we gotta back up. We gotta back up for a second. So, like, what is the Divine Liturgy? Like, what does that mean? We celebrate Orthros and Vespers and all these.
Those are services.
Yeah, those services, right?
Yeah.
But like the Divine Liturgy, that's just so like, it can only be celebrated once a day.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be celebrated with one person.
Mm-hmm.
It's got all these parts.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a lot of cool things.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
And it gets celebrated in our churches every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
That's like the coolest part about it is you.
Every single Sunday?
Every single Sunday.
Every Sunday. So,
where you go to church and basically you may start on a Sunday. If you go to church at home, you'll start with, if you get there bright and early, right when the service starts, you'll start off with matins or a different service. But basically it's a 45-minute service that comes in front of the Divine Liturgy.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And we do that at camp, right?
And we do that at camp, yeah.
I love this.
We have the only times we had to dress up, you bring like 3 go-to outfits to flex on everybody.
Yeah, you take
on
pictures
Liturgy
with
Day.
your friends in the pavilion. You get to... No. That's only a part of the Divine Liturgy, though. That's after the Divine Liturgy.
That's true.
So I read a couple really amazing books by this man named Father Thomas Hopko. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of him? Do you know?
I've heard of him, yeah.
So Father Thomas Hopko is pretty amazing, very intelligent man.
Mm-hmm.
And he once said, he said, the Divine Liturgy is not an act of personal devotion. It is not a prayer service. It is not merely one of the sacraments. The Divine Liturgy is the one common sacrament of the very being of the church itself. It is the one sacramental manifestation of the essence of the church as the community of God in heaven and on earth. It is the one unique sacramental revelation of the church as the mystical body and bride of Christ. That's kind of a lot to take in. That's a lot. So let's break that down. So basically what Father Thomas Hopko is saying is the Divine Liturgy isn't a personal devotion of prayer. It's not something that you do by yourself and this is your kind of sentiment to prayer. This is something much greater. It is your kind of being service with Christ. It is what you do when you go to church on Sunday and what you celebrate. And it is receiving the body and blood of Christ, which is an incredible thing, and we are very blessed to be able to do that. It's like, what's better?
It's a sacrament.
It's a sacrament.
It's a sacrament. That means it's like the connection between us and heaven. It's one of those like 7 sacraments, those like those things. They're very holy. Yeah. Very holy.
Amazing.
And
incredible.
What communion is one of those sacraments to where you are coming into communion with God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that later though.
For sure.
We could talk all day about communion.
Oh, we could.
That's something, I wait all week for it. I know,
me too. Trust me, you're not alone.
And we wait for it at camp too.
We do.
When we have communion, you got those like, like the 7 chalices and like
you got Father Chris over there and Father Anthony over there, and
exactly.
you don't know who to go to, but your counselor's like, no, you gotta go there. And I don't know.
Exactly.
It's crazy, but.
And so we've pretty much like wrapped up like how to like an overview of the Divine Liturgy, right? So when the liturgy first starts is not even when we say blessed is the kingdom, which is usually like the beginning of the service where you say blessed is the kingdom of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and then all right, liturgy has started, like let's get ready, strap in. But
so before that.
So before that, right? There's the preparation of the liturgy, and that's our priest, Father Anthony or whoever's serving the liturgy that day is responsible for going in super early to church. Super early. Right? I'm waking up, I don't know. At camp, I'm waking up at like it's a little later. You can go to church a little later.
I don't know if you're a girl's cabin and you're waking up pretty early.
You're waking up at like
hair
7, whatever.
Yeah.
And the priest is in the church already, right?
Yeah.
Getting liturgy ready. And what the first step of it is the cutting out of the lamb, right?
The lamb.
Which is just a square of bread, of the holy bread.
Right.
That's taken out and used as the body of Christ.
And so that's what we partake of during the service, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what goes in the actual chalice.
Yeah.
And he cuts that out before the service. He gets like the big, like huge, you guys seen holy bread, right? Like they're huge, like loaves of holy bread. and he cuts out a square of it, and that's what actually goes in the communion.
Absolutely. So actually, something that we urge you to do is kind of, as churches start opening up, obviously this is a very difficult time for a lot of people during quarantine, and something that we encourage you to do is kind of like call up your priest or reach out to anybody in your church who is kind of in charge of holy bread making, stuff like that. Holy bread still needs to be made, and we still, obviously if you can't be partaking of the body and blood of Christ in person, it's still important to kind of contribute what you can to your church. And so reach out to the amazing people who are making your holy bread and say, hey, like, I couldn't do afternoon program holy bread making with Caesar and Jackie today, so like I was wondering if I could come to the church and I could help you make some holy bread. And small things like that go a very long way. And so that's something that you can do to kind of emulate camp and bring the village home. So
because at camp we have that holy bread making class. It's like
absolutely
we have it for afternoon program, and you guys signed up. I remember I'm not really like a baker myself, but I remember I had to sign up once when I was like 14 or something. Like our counselor signed us all up.
I love
you're mad. You know how mad you get. Like you're like, I wanted to play AV-ball or whatever. And they signed you up. They signed me up for holy bread making, and I had no idea what really went into it. Like even making bread in general is hard, but the holy bread itself is like much denser, and it's very, very like specifically made to where if you can help Father out and bring that to church or anything like that, like that's a huge help. And I know like in our church we have those like ladies who come in and like make it every Sunday, like volunteer for it.
Yeah, shout out to our Women's Society. Super amazing.
Society, St. Nicholas, Bridgeport. We appreciate you guys.
We do. And Father Romanos, which is our priest.
Always shout out.
So always, definitely thank your priests for how early they do have to get up and all the things that they do in preparation for Divine Liturgy.
So once the lamb is made, once he cuts out the lamb, then he goes in. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's almost like an arrow kind of pointing thing that you kind of they stab into the bread and take out little pieces. And what really is happening when you take out these little pieces, he's praying for he has a whole list, like that list he reads like during in the middle of the service. There's a whole longer list, right, that usually includes like every parishioner. I know Father Anthony has one that includes every staff member ever.
Wow.
And like before every service, Father Chris or Father Anthony, whatever, will go in and prepare the bread by literally tearing off and naming every single person, having one small piece for them. Yeah,
it's definitely a process that not a lot of people kind of like think about when they're going into a service.
You don't even see it.
Yeah, you could, because if you don't see it, then it's like, but as Orthodox Christians, we every day put our faith in God and we put our faith in Christianity. And so we obviously, like, something kind of cool is just thanking your priest for doing these things in preparation for the Divine Liturgy, in preparation of serving you the body and blood of Christ that we partake of.
Exactly. So once everything's prepared, right, those are just two parts of preparation. Obviously, there's like readings that are read by the priest and a lot more that goes into it. I would really encourage you asking a priest exactly what goes down. I'm not there that early, even though I'm an altar boy. I should be there, like, clapping, like, cheering on the priest while he's doing it, but I'm not. So, ask your priest about it, really. It's, like, a lot of insight. That's a huge Ask Abuna question. Next time you have an Ask Abuna, whenever it is. Yeah. So, the apostles command us to pray spiritually every single day. And when we go into the Divine Liturgy, we have many different parts of the service. And so, like Caesar said, the beginning, the preparation is a very big part. But once we get into it, you hear, blessed is the kingdom, and, all that. There are a lot of different ways that we engage in this service. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like there's a lot of things to respond to, right? So how does that kind of work? And so in the beginning of the service, you hear that blessed is the kingdom, and then we start with the Great Litany, and that's like the first.
The Great Litany.
It's an amazing litany. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And you that is like the deacon or whoever it is, telling us to pray for people, like praying for specific, like the metropolitan or other parishioners or people who are sick or traveling and stuff like that. All that stuff you hear, and it's us saying, Lord, have mercy to it, and agreeing, not more than agreeing, like praying also. To where we're praying as a community. It's not just like this deacon saying something and then we like respond like, Lord have mercy. It's us also doing it.
Right.
Us being a part of it. And that's like you participating in the service. Is that like some people, I know a lot of campers, like they don't want to sing, like, you know, all that, blah, blah, blah. But even like mouthing it to yourself, even like thinking it, really understanding the meaning of it is you participating in the service.
Right. And in order to be fully participating in a service, it begins with understanding what you're saying. So you're not going to be engaged if you don't understand kind of like what is being said and what's going on. And so that's kind of like a really cool part, is that we begin this service by praying for like these different communities, these different people, and it's a super important part. And so before we get to like all of the kind of like the singing and the scriptures and everything, this is like the very first thing. And so that's where like the Divine Liturgy begins, and it's a pretty interesting process.
Yeah, and it brings a lot of meaning to exactly why we're in church. You know, like a lot of people can see church as like I don't know. I remember when I was a kid, I would just see it as like standing or whatever. When I was like 6 or 7, I would like be in church and I'd be like, wow, we're standing for like a really long time. And there's some guys singing up there and whatever. Yeah. And a lot of churches, like us at camp, we all sing. Like all the campers and all of us all stand together and sing along and chant along. But you guys at your home parishes may have like, I know we have just a choir, and like a lot of people in the actual pews don't really sing. Right. So that doesn't necessarily mean, singing is only for the choir at all. No. It means that, okay, I'm also going to participate in the service. You are too. So anything you do or say, it can be along with the choir, and it means exactly what it means coming from you. Right. Same thing. So that's why at camp, it's such a blessing. Like you're in the midst of this crowd of kids. Yeah, it sounds really beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, it's like a harmony of everybody.
It is.
We're blessed to have that, really.
So kind of like once we get to that part of the service, we're in the beginning, we have something called the 3 Antiphons, and that's what kind of follows that process. So what that consists of is different psalms, different scriptures, and if you've ever been in any Divine Liturgy, you will always hear these things being read or chanted or sang.
And so the antiphons are really just the name for it, and what it like the meaning of the actual word like antiphon comes from the beginning of when the service was celebrated, and they used to have 2 choirs singing it, and there would be one responding and one saying and responding and saying, and it's basically like all an antiphon means, like the word itself just means like replying in a way, like a choir like replying to it. So there's no like specific meaning. Like if you don't understand the word antiphon, it doesn't mean you can't understand what's going on in this. It's just like you understanding that, okay, this is the part of the service where we read some psalms and like and you just listen along, and they vary obviously like from each service, so you can't really say like, this exact reading is going to be read, but
so it's really not that complicated. It's not like a very complicated part. It's just, this is exactly what it is. It's these choirs responding to each other, and it's this that's being read. Exactly. So I know like I remember growing up and being at camp when we have, our books that follow the services, and reading like Psalm 50 and like kind of trying to remember like every single word of it. And you're like, okay, like how do I remember like these antiphons and all that? And it's crazy, and it's like amazing because you're like, wow, this is like such a cool part of Orthodoxy. Here we are. And but it's something that it's just what happens every service.
So and a lot of it, even me, like me going through and like trying to understand every single part of what's going on in the service, and like trying to understand where everything came from and everything, I tend to overcomplicate it to where if you really just look at it and you look at really what's the message being sent in these antiphons, it's literally just us reading our psalm and verse and like taking the meaning from that, and that's all it really is. Absolutely. And so after the third one, after the final antiphon.
The final one. The third. There's 3, right?
There's 3.
Okay. All right.
The final one, you start the little entrance, and we know about the little entrance and the great entrance.
Oh, so like the little entrance. It's not the grande one. It's not like the venti one. It's like
It's
the little one.
the small one.
Small one.
Did you say grande?
Yeah, like at Starbucks, you got like the different. So this is the little entrance, not the great one.
Is that what a grande means? Big?
No, what? Venti is big. Come on, step up.
What are
Your
you
Starbucks
talking
game
about?
is
The
weak.
Venti,
then grande, then tall.
Oh.
Yeah. So
okay.
Anyway.
That doesn't make sense. Why is
you clearly not Starbucks
where's
drinker?
Language
Did you answer Duncan?
Is it like Latin roots? Like, you know?
I'm pretty sure it's Spanish.
In Spanish?
Yeah.
Grande means big in Spanish.
All right. Never mind.
All right, whatever.
Anyways, all right. Anyway, but I always really look forward to the great entrance because that's when I see you walk around and like all my cousins. Got Mike
we're on the
walking
small
around.
entrance, right? We're talking about the great entrance.
But I never see. It's hard for me to see the small entrance. So the little entrance, right?
Okay.
So can you explain it to me from the altar boy perspective, right? Because you're kind of up and close and personal.
Like a behind the scenes thing.
I got like my Amu standing in front of me, super tall. So if you could like,
I got it. All right. So in the altar. As an altar, you see this going down to where me as a kid, I remember, I'm going to tell you a lot. We're going to throw a lot of anecdotes about my childhood church days. When I was a kid and I would serve in the church and you're in the altar, all I really know about the small entrance coming up was that like the priest would kind of nudge me, like our priest would just like, I'd be like, oh, I got to go grab the lantern. And then like quickly, like the priest would come around the altar table and we'd go out the door. And I was like, okay, like, it's very well timed. It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
I don't know. It's crazy. And so basically, what happens is the priest can easily like just hold they're bringing around the gospel. That's like what the small entrance is. It's like the small entrance to like we're about to read some scripture. Like this is the holy gospel. Like it's such a holy thing that we need to. I don't know if that's an actual like exact meaning of the little entrance. I don't know if that's what they call it per se for that exact reason. But when it's happening, you're bringing the gospel around the altar first, and I'm suspecting that just like means, I don't know why actually. I don't know why they bring it around the altar first, but they do.
So we'll have that's an Ask a Boona question.
That is Ask a Boona question. Right. I got it for next time.
So if anybody knows the answer to this, let us know.
Yeah, comment, subscribe,
Absolutely.
Like this video,
or if you can, or definitely use that as an Ask a Boona question.
Exactly. So that's my next one.
Yeah.
See? Yeah. So he goes around the altar and then they come out and stand right in front of the altar.
Okay.
And that's like in the middle of the church and that's the little entrance.
So, all right. So when you do that, so I see the priest do that. I see him, I see that happen. But I also hear them kind of singing this 2 different hymns. So what is that? Why? Like, what are those hymns called? What are they? You
talking about the Troparion?
The Troparion, the Troparion, right?
The Troparion and the Kontakion in this part of the service are sung for the specific day or whatever time, time of year in the church calendar it is, or whatever church you're in. It may vary as well. But these are 2 hymns, the Troparion and the Kontakion, that are sung right after the little entrance.
Right. So even though, kind of like how we switch the gospel readings every week, it's different. So the Troparion and everything that we do has a very specific date, and so like this day, if it's May 31st on whatever day or Sunday it is, it's going to be very specific for that day. So it changes, which is kind of cool because every week you're hearing something different.
Exactly. And that transitions right into the scripture readings. And the scripture readings vary every week, right?
Right.
And at camp, when you're at church twice a day, you actually get to read the reading of the day every day.
Yeah.
So when you start to realize that there's a reading for every day. So the Sunday gospel and the Sunday epistle that we're reading are literally just readings of the day.
Absolutely.
They're what is read on that specific Sunday, and so that's why we read it in our church.
So oftentimes you'll hear the evening prokimenon, it's very familiar. Is that's like what sets the tone for all of the scriptures that are about to be read.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like I would call it like a summary.
Like a summary, yeah. Like something that sets a tone. That's a good way to put it. So it sets a tone for the reading. So you read the prokimenon before the actual epistle reading, and so whoever's chanting will start with the prokimenon of that day, and then the epistle reading starts. And that can come from either like the actual epistle or the Acts of the Apostles. Right, exactly. And you can hear it as like a letter sometimes. It's like different. They're all different.
I know that like when I was little and I was always in church or like at camp, it's easy like during the Divine Liturgy to kind of get confused as to like because like sometimes services can be very long, and so it's like, oh, when does the epistle reading happen, or when does the gospel reading happen? And so like something like how I always remembered it is that like, so we have, obviously you have the prokimenon, which is the beginning of, it prefaces all of the scriptures, and then you have the epistle reading, and then in between the epistle and the gospel is your 3 alleluias. So it's like alleluia, 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 right? Yeah, Caesar could probably do it a little better than I can. But that's like, it comes right after the epistle and right before the gospel. Well, right after, but like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And so that's something you can like take for, this is something that actually does happen every service, and that's like the tradition of the church.
And it's kind of like cool because in the Divine Liturgy, like, especially if you are like, when you're following along, it's a good way to like know where you are and like know, oh, like this is where we are, this is what I'm supposed to be reading, and it kind of like helps you follow along throughout the whole service.
Exactly.
You know, like when you're little and like Caesar said this earlier, we were talking about like, oh, you know when the Lord's Prayer is like being said, because you're like, okay, well, communion's coming
like,
up.
All right, like there's 10 more minutes, like blah, 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 like you're like waiting as a kid. But once you start to like learn more about the church and you start to understand the meaning of all these things, it literally is like movie scenes that come at one after another, and like you're watching it and you're like seeing how it plays out too.
Right. So next time, like whether you're watching the Divine Liturgy through like live stream or you're in person, like it's kind of a cool thing to be able to be like, oh, this is the epistle, like this is, I know what's coming next, and follow along and kind of like segue into that by what you know. So we hope that like you can learn something. Remember, it goes like epistle, alleluia, gospel.
The gospel is literally a reading from the New Testament. And something from Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. You know, you hear those. Like I remember we were talking about it too.
Yeah.
Like when you
you try to like guess if it's gonna be Mark. Like I'd be like, oh, it's totally Matthew today. Like if I had no idea, I'd be like, no, is it Mark or is it John?
Yeah.
Could be Luke. I don't really know.
And there's no specific reason for that. Like there's no like, it's just a different reading every day. Yeah. And so when you come into that part of the service and you're about to read the gospel, understand that when you're reading that gospel, it literally is either the deacon or the priest reading that part of the New Testament to you. Right. And so it's usually chanted, and sometimes if it's like super long, it's read, but that's when the gospel comes, and then right after that, you have the sermon. And in camp, I always knew, this is always how I remember. It comes when we all get to sit down. That's your first chance to sit down at camp. You know, you're like crying the whole service to your counselor. You're like, can I go to the bathroom? I'm like, I know you don't want to go to the bathroom. Like, you literally are just trying to go sit down, like, whatever. But this is the part of camp where we all sit and we hear a priest or a bishop or anybody come and try to talk about the gospel. And the best part about it, I think, is that the sermon can be anything that the priest makes it. So I've had some priests come in and like they talk for 2 minutes about the gospel, and they'll like read it, like talk about it a little bit, because sometimes the gospel is complicated to talk about, or like some things not complicated necessarily, but like some things maybe like are straightforward, and like you can get like whatever you need from it from hearing the gospel itself.
For sure. And like for me, same thing. Like I have listened to many different priests kind of treat the sermon very differently. And I think that it's really interesting because I mean, and I know our home parish priest, Father Romanos, does an incredible job at really connecting like what this gospel means to
our everyday life
and like how we should live as an Orthodox Christian. And it's always prevalent, it's always important,
and those are the best ones. You
yeah,
always know those are the best ones, to where
amazing.
You take something that was written or like
so long ago
so long ago, to where now when you apply it, because some people really don't see the connections,
right?
Like when you read it the first time, you're like, oh, like that's about a planter like planting seeds. I don't garden, like I don't need to worry about this at all. But in reality, it's something that is specifically meant, like even behind the meaning behind it is something that you may not even realize before the sermon comes, and the priest can kind of make it more simple. That's like really what the priest's job is.
Yeah.
Is making it more simple for us, like bringing us closer to God however way he can. And through the sermon, that's one way. And
that's kind of like where your role as a parishioner really plays in during the Divine Liturgy, because to be able to connect these things, like whatever the gospel reading was, even if, like Caesar said, like even if you don't think it's that like relates as much to your life today, it's super important to be like, how do I want to live my life as an Orthodox Christian, and how do I want to go forward, like obviously one of the very like famous quotes that we often hear is like, preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary use words, right? And so I think that that's kind of cool, because that the part where like you're like, oh yeah, I do get to sit down, or like it's that point in the service, it's like really use that time to hone in on what is being said and interpret the gospel how you want to interpret it to live the best like Orthodox Christian life that you can live.
And that's something for me, I noticed that obviously in church you're in there for a long time, and you can obviously like look off and like zone out sometimes or not pay attention. But to me, I know when I'm listening to that sermon, like those are the most important words that are gonna like my ears are gonna hear that day. And so I make sure, like no matter what, if I didn't pay attention to the whole rest of the service, I have no idea what's going on, I'm listening to the sermon no matter what.
Absolutely.
And you can get more out of it than a lot of people can by just like reading the gospel itself.
Yeah.
So make those a big thing when you go to church. Respect your priest and really listen to what they got to say, because it really will help you and your faith, whole thing.
Yeah.
All around.
And I think that like going off of all of that, it's like as you are able, like we were saying before, like as you're able to learn what the Divine Liturgy means and what all of these different aspects means, you're more willing yourself to want to listen and to want to interpret. And that is kind of something that's really cool. And camp is an amazing place to learn those things. So, I mean, I didn't know that there's the Liturgy of the Catechumens and then the Liturgy of the Word. And I didn't know like certain things like that. And now
the Liturgy of the Word is the Liturgy of the Catechumens, but the second part of the liturgy is actually called it's
I mean, it's definitely like,
sorry. Keep going.
Yeah. So like once you start to understand those things, it kind of gives you a much greater perspective on the Orthodox faith. And so if you're able to understand those things, then like you probably have more Ask Abuna questions. Like I know that Caesar and I are going to do Ask Abuna this week with our priest, and we already have a list of questions just from like learning about this lesson. So if there's any way that you can kind of take this home, take the village home, as we say, and interpret it how you want, and preach the gospel in your daily life.
In your actions. That's
in your actions. It's all through your actions.
The gospel. You could hear the gospel and like see that as like a cool story even, or anything like that. But really what that quote means, like doing it, and Eli's going to love this, like it's been his Instagram bio for years, whatever, we get it. But that's really through your actions and how like people see you, and that's exactly how they see the Orthodox faith.
For sure. Yeah. So once you understand the beginning, middle, and end of the Divine Liturgy, then you're kind of able to follow the service a lot better.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know that there's a lot of different parts that go into it. And so we are definitely going to talk a lot more about the second part of how that works in the next lesson. So if you want to learn more about the rest of the Divine Liturgy, tune in, because we will be going more into depth about that. But
for this one, we're gonna end this episode. Today's
episode of The Village at Home.
We're really YouTubers. We're gonna end this one just by talking about that like specific part of the liturgy. Like that first half of the liturgy we just talked about is like right after you say the gospel and you hear the sermon, and then you have another litany where you're like saying Lord have mercy again. And then you go into the prayer for the catechumen. And this in our church, I know they don't even say it.
Right.
And in my church, I have another church I go to that's closer to that's closer to the college I go to, and they have that prayer being said. It's an Orthodox Church of America. It's an OCA church. It's a different like branch of Orthodoxy than like the Antiochian one we go to. But they read that, and basically what the prayer is saying is, you may hear it and it'll say, it sounds kind of harsh, where they literally say like the prayer for the catechumen is like, all right, catechumen, like leave now, like it's your time, like just dip out, like we're gonna go into like the faith stuff, and we don't like, you guys can't necessarily be here, which is like in the church today, that's like crazy. You don't kick anybody out of church for no matter what. But this part of the service was said in the beginning, because in like the beginning of the Divine Liturgy being, like the service happening, is they used to say this because it was us saying like, all right, now we're going to go into like the sacrament of communion, and this is a really big deal, and like we're going to get into the great entrance, we're going to do all these things. So for right now, you guys can leave, because there's nothing, like you guys can't take communion. So like you should, this part is for like people who are Orthodox basically.
And I go to, where I go to school in Michigan, there's a Greek Orthodox church that I go to. And so oftentimes, like Caesar was saying, he goes to an OCA church, there's different types of, there's different types of Orthodox churches, and that's like such a cool thing, because you're hearing so many different languages, so many different cultures, and like at camp when we say like Lord have mercy in like, what is it, 7 different languages, 6 or 7? It's like, it makes you think like this is why Orthodoxy is universal, in that it can be celebrated in so many different like cultures and ways, and so that's kind of a very blessed thing.
We're inclusive.
For sure.
But in this part of the service, you're like, oh, like why are we so like excluding these people? Like why can't catechumen be here? And obviously now in the church, we allow everybody to stay in church the whole time. Even if you're a catechumen, like somebody who's about to be baptized, you could stay throughout the whole service, but you obviously can't take communion, because it's a sacrament. It's for people who are baptized Orthodox. Only. Yeah. Which is not us excluding anybody. It's just a sacrament that we have, and like it's specific
for sure
us, because we like are a part of the church.
Yeah.
And so here, when the catechumen are leaving per se, that's basically back in the day, that's them like leaving, and like they've learned all they could from the service. And those catechumen would actually like traditionally go and get catechized more, like so they'd go and ask somebody about more stuff, like, and that would usually happen in the second half of the service, where everyone else is receiving communion.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool.
So that is basically the end of the first half of the service, and that's where we're gonna end this episode.
Episode 1.
Lesson 1. Jackie and Caesar, the Antiochian Village, 2020 virtual camp. Stay tuned. We got another video coming, but hope you guys enjoyed this. We love seeing you guys again.
So tune in for our next one if you want to learn about the second half of what we have to say about the Divine Liturgy and what it means. And it's going to be really interesting. So we hope that you enjoyed this morning program lesson, and many more to come.
All right, guys, enjoy your day. Thanks for listening.
And God bless.
God bless.